Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the dark side of innovation. Who's been here on the expo booth, the expo floor? Who has not seen the word A or the letters AI or agentic AI or Gen AI or anything AI? So welcome. You're going to listen to a talk about 40 minutes about AI. But we're going to talk about the other side of AI, the darker side. And I think maybe I'm here to burst a couple of bubbles. It's probably the point of view that we see from Trellix and that we see in our research. And I'm very eager to hear if there's experts here in the room as well, what they see. Because I think, not to overhype it, there's a lot going on, and yes, we need to take it seriously, but it's not the AI, the driver is not necessarily the driver to innovate with all the products. A lot of companies and a lot of people would like everybody to believe that cyber criminals are way ahead of us and are doing everything we cannot imagine with AI. And I was like, that's strange. We have the brightest people in the world working in the industry, and a bunch of cyber criminals are further ahead than we are. Okay, let's see if that's really true. Shoot, I just gave away the gist of my talk. But anyways, we're going to look at what cyber criminals are doing. A little bit cyber criminal, a little bit nation state. Just a disclaimer, we just published a threat report. This is stuff that's in the threat report and in the previous threat report. So if you want to get a little bit more in-depth, highly recommend reading that content. It's not a plug, but it's really just honest to God. It's a thing that we find important. The disclaimer, we'll go skip that through. So I'd like to start the talk with a statement. So 2 decades after Edison switched on the light bulb, only 3% of US businesses was using electricity. We will revisit this statement later on. And what this tells us is the difference between innovation and transformation, or innovation and disruption. So electricity made a lot of things possible for us. In the past, you had factories and businesses that were developing stuff. They were dependent on steam. So steam rises, so you had high-rise buildings, and they had to be near water. Electricity allowed us to move around and to build houses, factories, other things in places that did not have water, were not dependent on steam. So you can do that with electricity. 2 decades, only 3%. That's staggering. I hope our innovation to transformation is a little bit quicker nowadays. But it does show that it's, yes, there's a new innovation, but will that change everything dramatically? We'll have to see. I'd like to go back with you all and hands up. Who was here? Everybody remembers where they were. What was it? November 2022 when ChatGPT became public? Everybody was like, oh, let's play around. And then the first cybersecurity people was like, oh, these Yara rules, they suck. And it doesn't know anything and blah, blah, blah. Everybody eating their words up right now? Yeah. So this is how I saw it at that time. It was more or less a race, and we were all at the start line. So it's us as vendors, you as practitioners, or as vendors or consumers. It's the regulators, governments, but also criminals. Everybody is at the same start line of a race. The difference is we don't know how long this race is. We don't know how far we're running. We don't even know what the track looks like. We don't know what the boundaries are. We don't know if there's timekeeping. We're just running. And that's kind of the feeling that we have. We're all running, and the regulators are trying to catch up. They're trying to make things like an ethical AI and what can we do and what not. And then the companies are trying to do this as well. And then you have the criminals that are just like tagging along and do whatever they want. But it does, like, this picture resonate with me because it is like we're all at the same race. And everybody's innovating. Everybody's trying to get ahead. So I will skip over all the stuff that you can hear on the expo floor because that's Gen AI done by the vendors. But let's go to the one session that we're going to talk about Gen AI by the cyber criminals. So this is what's happening now. I'm taking stuff from our different threat reports, things that we saw that we think were interesting. There's a lot of examples from Russian underground forums. So if you speak Russian or read Russian, you'll have a field day, if it's not an ITAD. But hopefully it can give you a sense of a feeling what goes on. So this is literally what we find on a daily basis. And then you can see, like, okay, how far ahead are they? Is it real? Is the threat real? So this is an example I'd like to give as well. It's very early on. It's about a year ago. And it's Project ChatGPT in Jabber. So an integration of a GPT into your Jabber, your chat client, which cybercriminals had. Why this stood out to us was like, huh? So somebody is actually offering his or her API key, and you can include it in your own Jabber and have your conversations. I was like, what are we dealing with here? Is this something new or novel, or is this some threat researcher who has his own API key and thought, like, maybe it's a good idea if I just offer this in the underground and see what happens with it. And then 2 years later, I have a talk at RSA, and then I can say, like, hey, we dropped our API key on a Russian forum, and guess what we found? But I don't have that talk yet. So maybe there's somebody in the room here, but so we actually suspect that it might actually be a threat researcher doing this, and otherwise it's interesting to see, because I wouldn't use that API key because I have no control over it. But they use it to enhance stuff, and it's just a formal chatbot. Another simple example, and we'll start from simple and we'll get to more interesting stuff as well, is a web scanner. It's the mundane, it's the boring stuff. It's the stuff that takes a lot of work. So they have a simple web scanner that they use, and they use an AI to enrich the findings that they have. And this is just somebody offering this. So real entrepreneurial spirit. I have a web scanner, I put some AI in it, I make it a little nicer, and I try to sell it. This was an interesting one. Gemini. So there are friends at Google here in the room. Take note, because this is happening as well. This is an author, I have to catch his name, what's it? Hacker Yaroslav, that's a really small font. And he created a script and a tool that essentially is looking for vulnerabilities, and you can sign up with your private Telegram channel. And what it will do, it will alert when it finds new vulnerabilities of a net range that you're scanning, and it uses Gemini from Google to enrich the findings. So like, hey, what can you tell me about this vulnerability? Can you give me a write-up? And that all gets delivered to your Telegram channel. So this is the Telegram channel, an example. You can see the new vulnerabilities come in, and then essentially it gives you a whole write-up with feedback, how to exploit, how to do things from Google. So it's not that much different from, I think, us in our day-to-day life when we have a piece of code that we want to review, or we ask for a recipe, or what are the best restaurants in San Francisco and the Moscone area that are not having any fun from the conference, where you want to have a quiet dinner. Very similar, right? We all use it, and but it was interesting to see that they're using a open platform, not any dark GPT or dark LLM that they make you believe, just simple Gemini. Another one that's interesting is that we see it with info stealers. Who is here familiar with info stealers? I assume almost everyone. So for those who are not, info stealers, simple malware. Criminals often send it through phishing or in other ways. It compromises the system. It pulls out credentials, but not only credentials, but also browser fingerprints, cookies, session tokens, you name it. And it's being sold, those logs. And then you can use those logs to impersonate an actor, take over a session, and log in. Especially if you have no multi-factor authentication enabled or not properly, you can become a victim. And the nasty thing with info stealers is that you do not have to be infected to become a victim. Somebody who has access to your portal, your platform, could be a third-party supplier or somebody else, got infected, and those credentials are leaked, then they will be available to the threat actor, and they can use those credentials to log into your system. So when we see a lot of companies being breached, and especially with ransomware, very often there's an info stealer at the base of it. And also based on the Blockbuster leaks that we discussed on Monday a little bit, it's very interesting to see that all these commodity malware, like info stealers, have a very strong link with ransomware actors as well. So this is a space that we keep an eye on. And this is an example of Luma Stealer, a quite popular one. And they were using AI, and it's almost like being on the expo floor because they all want to use AI. But they use it to determine if there's any bots. So what we as researchers like to do, we like to infect ourselves with malware in a fake situation and then think about like, okay, are there new instructions coming? Are my credentials ending up somewhere? Can we study the malware? And criminals don't like that because they can try to sell our credentials or our data, but it's not worth to anyone. So in this case, they were doing some tricks to determine if they were dealing with a researcher or not. So this is the little cat and mouse game we always play. We will see this more often happening. So botnet emulation is another one that's very popular when you look at like getting the latest builds and loads from botnets. And then doing the emulation by infecting yourselves. We're seeing more and more threat actors are doing some level of detection to see if it's like, is it a legitimate victim or is this a VM or a research machine, and they have generative AI try to help with that. Now a recent example, which is, I don't even know, I would say it in Dutch, but you would all think that I'm gonna have like a heart attack right now if I say it, because I say Gabbers, but see, I don't have a cold. But Gabbers or Gabbers shop. And this is a Russian shop that is offering credentials. Who here does something with stolen credentials? Not on the wrong side, but like, is stolen credentials a concern? Are we using like a vendor that, that uses, you get stolen credentials for your organization, you try to remediate that, you try to figure out, okay, which user is affected, how can I roll out or roll back, how can I make sure that everything's safe? On the other side, criminals are faced with, and this is actually really nice to hear, criminals will trick each other. So they will repurpose from those info stealer logs and from other data breaches, they will mix and match credentials up and again, and they will resell them. So there's a very big problem with credentials that are not valid, that are not really doing anything. They're not usable. And this shop sets out to check using AI, and they kind of do a nice advertisement for it. Mind you, we haven't tested it out yet, so we don't know if they're for real, but they claim that they have a system using generative AI to check if the credentials are real. So if you would buy something from their shop, it's clean, it's high value, and you could actually access the other system. And that's, a next evolvement a little bit. And this is a small, speaking about evolvement, this is something we see quite often. And this is something that's growing that we find interesting, and it's going to be, we're probably going to see this, maybe even through voice emails and other things, is voice cloning services. So this is being advertised as well. The first one is a little older. And this is a voice cloning service, and like I wanted to read off the screen, and I didn't memorize this, but he is offering, or she is offering it, voice cloning extortion of politicians and large crypto influencers or cryptography influencers. And this was May last year. Very interesting, very timely. But it stood out to us. It's like, oh, interesting. You specifically position your product to mimic politicians? Okay. Another threat actor, and this is actually happening in the last couple of months, they are offering a more advanced voice cloning service. This is Russian, but I'll loosely translate it. It's actually for WhatsApp and Telegram. And what this does is you can call somebody with their software, and you have a whole call script, like a call center, and you can interact with somebody with a cloned voice. So somebody can clone my voice, call, let's say my coworker Liana is in the room, I call her, and I say like, hey, Liana, I need a really approval for X, Y, or Z or whatever. And she's like, okay, John, I got it. And that's just them. So this is something that we think could be pretty disturbing. How would you solve this? Any ideas? Call back, there you go. Yeah, no number, call back. Maybe a good old safe word before you start a conversation, I don't know. But good interaction, good way to see that criminals are thinking about this stuff. And by the way, phishing, yes, we have email products and whatever, and we see a lot of phishing email in our research, and there's still phishing email that is really badly written, but there's also phishing email that's actually really nicely written and we suspect, and it's really hard to detect, but they use some generative AI on the back end to craft perfect phishing emails. And later on, we'll show some stuff from OpenAI that they've published, so if you've read that stuff, it might sound familiar. But we can see that, every self-respecting threat actor is now using a ChatGPT to craft the perfect phishing email, right? The spelling mistakes and all that stuff is past. But not only that, ransomware actors, our worst fear, ransomware actors are using GPT, and it shows that they're just human. So on Monday, we had a talk, and we talked a little bit about Blackbuster, and funny enough, they're also using ChatGPT. And this is literally in the chats, so it's not an eye chart. You can download the slides or whatever, or you can read the blog that we published on it. Blackbuster was infiltrating a victim. They were in the network, they were taking over the session. However, the person or the system that they were on, there was actually a user active on that system. So they had a remote desktop or remote management console session. So that person, as you can imagine, saw the mouse moving and all these things happening. So that person was panicking. He's like, shit, my computer is possessed. So that person opened up a chat box and said, hey, who are you? What are you doing? On the other end of the line, there were a bunch of Russian criminals, and they were like, ooh, we're caught. What do we do now? So sure enough, pretty quick thinking on their feet, they opened up ChatGPT, and they prompted, say hey, write down that we're from a security operations team in perfect English, and make sure that we can convince a user that was worried that we're doing things legitimate. And sure enough, they crafted a whole story and put that back in the chatbot or in the notepad what the user had launched. And they basically explained that they're from the SOC, they were doing some tests on other stuff, and the user bought it. They were like, okay, great, good to keep my network safe and blah, 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 and then sure enough, they're encrypted. But that does show that they are quick to think on their feet. Because if they didn't have this, how else would they write something in perfect English if it's not their first language and convince somebody? So I thought this was an interesting example. Another way, they're using ChatGPT to rewrite code. So to convert one language to another, that's something that we as researchers or developers use on a daily basis as well. So that's nothing new. This is, it shows that they're doing the same things. They don't have some kind of magical potion or some magical system where they can do stuff that we can't. I like to slowly pivot towards some nation-state examples, and then we'll tie it a little bit back together. But I think you can see a common theme, and probably my tone of voice, that it takes a while to go from innovation to transformation. The way we address these things within our team is we call them it's more of a point solution. There is a problem, and I use AI to solve that single problem. But it's not across the whole chain. Okay, looking a little bit at state-sponsored. So early in 2024, there was a really interesting article from OpenAI that was in the news. And they say, hey, there was a Russian group leveraging ChatGPT to affect the US elections. They were not succeeded because it came out, but we see our known suspects or the known nations that we know that are also targeting us with APT attacks, doing the same thing and exploring things with AI. And if you haven't checked it out, OpenAI, I'm a big fan of this. They published a threat report. The latest one was in February 25. So if it comes, the link to the report is underneath, but just the too long didn't read. They saw a lot of content generation of misinformation by nation states. What was interesting is the first time they saw that something that was generated with AI was transmitted to mainstream media. So that gives us some warning that it becomes really good. And maybe mainstream media or all the news outlets need to check all their facts and do better fact checking or whatever before covering the story, especially in uncertain times. Pig butchering or romance scams. Obviously, I can create the best love letters using ChatGPT. So why can't I use it to do a romance scam in a different language? Perfect. And we have them again, the Iranian-linked information operations. So this is definitely one to check out. I can highly recommend it. This was an older one that stood out as well, and this was actually an operation done by the FBI, US intelligence agency, the Dutch intelligence agency, makes me a little proud because I'm from the Netherlands, and the Canadians. And it was an AI bot farm called Meliorator. They link it to the Russian GRU, and it was aimed at sending misinformation to the Ukraine conflict. So it sounds very complicated, and it's an excellent write-up if you want to see it, but essentially what they built was a whole system with bots, and they were managed through AI, and they were creating content, and they were creating things, and they were spewing out misinformation just to influence and flood social media with fake news about the Russian-Ukraine conflict. Why is this a little bit more interesting than, or different from the cybercrime stuff that we saw, is that the whole chain was controlled by a nation state. So they did the whole AI, they delivered it, they did the whole phishing campaign, and this is true innovation then. They completely ran that operation, and it was AI fed. We'll show it later on. We'll have a little talk about why cyber criminals could also be limited by certain things. But they have the whole kill chain under their control. Another example, KnowBe4. There was a very interesting one. I don't know if you're familiar with some of the tactics of the DPRK relink groups, like Lazarus, Hidden Cobra. In the past, I worked on an operation called Operation Dream Job. That was where they were trying to infiltrate or post themselves as recruiters, and they were trying to get jobs or influence other people within companies. So they were either applying for a job, or they were a recruiter, and they were approaching other people with, like, defense contractors or other folks, trying to get information, and then eventually they will send out a resume or a job requisition or posting that was laced with malware, and that's how to try to get in. So this was a known tactic. However, now they're using deepfakes. In other words, leveraging AI to get through the interview, to actually get the job, so they get a little bit further down the line. And then once they got the job and they got the laptop from the company, they were trying to get into the network and find out where all the company's secrets were, and that's where they got caught. But it is interesting to see. So even at the HR department, how do you determine that your candidate is real? So, like, maybe you want to do additional background checks. You really, really want to do, and if a new employee starts, maybe you want to do some heightened security on their computer, because they need to get installed, they need to get comfortable with some systems, but that doesn't mean that they're running rclone or doing an AD find scan of your network or doing all kinds of weird connections, because that should stand out. And check, double check, they always say in the military, but verify physical location and scrutinize that resume, especially if there's holes in a resume, if it doesn't add up. See if the picture is AI generated. I'm not familiar with all the best tools, but there's some stuff. But this was those two pictures, that was a real person on the left, and then the operator used that real person to merge that with his face and created that picture on the right. So that's pretty nifty if you ask me. So this is stuff that we're going to see much more. And this was by actually a really, really good research by KnowBe4. So if I would say go to the booth, and maybe they have even better stories than I can tell. But this brings us to what I said in the beginning. Going from an innovation to a transformation takes time. And like I said, if factories are dependent on steam, and they're dependent on a location that has water, you're only limited in your growth. And you can only innovate so far because there's things that are, there's limiting factors with the situation that you're in to grow any further. If it's electricity, you can have You can rely on electricity, but there needs to be a grid as well. So when we look at cybercriminals, and I gave a loose example, so let's tie it together. This is it's way too small for this screen, I can see that. But essentially, it comes down to this. If a cybercriminal wants to commit crime, they are reliant on adjacent services. So, as an anecdote, you would have, like when I grew up, you had a pizzeria, and they did the delivery themselves. They had cars, they had delivery guys, they had to take care of them, they're on the payroll, and all that stuff. That takes time, and that's money that is going away from buying the new pizza oven or buying other stuff. And then, sure enough, we have services like Uber or Postmates or whatever. And you would see that the logistics is now handled by a third party, and they're just focused on logistics. And then the pizzeria can focus on baking the pizzas, and then everybody focuses on something else. This is also true with cybercriminal. So the cybercriminal underground, there are a lot of people that specialize in certain things, and they offer their services. Just like you saw that shop with the credentials, just like you saw the info stealer, just like you saw the vulnerability scanner. So in order to commit a full crime, let's say we're doing, ransomware, we need to have hosting that we can trust. That is like bulletproof. We need to be able to have a VPN that nobody can trace us and that doesn't keep logs. We need to be able to code malware. Okay, let's say that we decode the malware. We're really good. So we code the malware. But that malware, we need to make sure that it's fully undetectable. So there's a service called Counter AV services. So I can upload my malware and I can see if it's detected or not. I'll deploy the ransomware. I need some tools for data exfiltration. Oh, I need my hosting provider. I need a platform in Tor to extort my victims. I need to do negotiations. Maybe I need a third party for that. Maybe I'll hire some kind of call center that calls up my victims and put pressure on them. And then let alone, when the victim actually pays, I need somebody to help me with laundering the money, with the Bitcoin tumbling. And as you can see, if you want to do that really well, it's almost impossible to do that alone. So essentially, if I am innovating in my own swim lane, my innovation is limited by the person to the left and the right of me. So I need to make sure that they are also innovating. So what we're seeing right now, that transformation, or we're having the transformation is not taking place. We're still seeing that point solution, and there's not a system overhaul or system solution as well. So that will take time. And it's also decision making, right? Everybody, I assume, have a smartphone, right? Everybody has one. When Apple came out with the first iPhone, would they have thought that they would disrupt the taxi market? I don't think so. But the iPhone was the innovation. But sure enough, later on, with services like Uber and Lyft and Bolt, we disrupted. And that's the thing. It's like an AI change takes time, and it influenced the decision making. So, perfect example, like in London, country next to me. The taxi drivers used to have some of the most strenuous tests to become a taxi driver. They had to memorize all the streets of London to become a taxi driver. Sure enough, that little gizmo comes around with Google Maps and whatever. You don't have to memorize all the streets. So it changes a lot of the conventional thinking. And that's with us right now, because what if I interview everybody here? I guess everybody is on a different stage of embracing innovation. Like I had a conversation today about Waymo. I haven't tried the car yet. I want to try it. Who's driven in one of those Waymo cars here? Isn't that pretty cool? Who would never get into a Waymo car? See? So that shows where you're at the decision making. It's like, how comfortable are you with trusting AI? And some people are a little bit, actually we're the wrong crowd for that, right? We're security professionals, so we used to be really hesitant. But yeah, so that also is a factor that makes it more difficult, or sometimes limits adoption, but it's that how you say, like that conversation, that healthy conversation, that struggle, that brings out the best. But at the same time, like I said, cyber criminals, they're dependent on the person left and right of them. So that's the same with the supply chain. Like I can have a restaurant. Let's say I make a restaurant, and restaurants have menus because they have something that the chef knows, and you know how to plan with all your ingredients. So you can buy all your ingredients from your supplier, and there's like this whole supply chain that is you can calculate on. So what if through AI we say like, okay, there's no menus, and we'll just make anything you want? Well, you can see like the restaurant could have great ideals, but where does that put the pressure on? That put the pressure on the supplier. So it's making the dependency is shifting down the supply chain. And that makes synchronization even more difficult because, okay, what if we have a very flexible supplier that can give me all the ingredients or whatever that I want within minutes? I'm just hypothetically, right? But what if all the restaurants here in San Francisco ask the same thing within minutes? And they're going to be out of stock. So these are things that like we take almost for granted now with AI, and we're looking at things like, oh, but you can do all these things at your fingertips, but there's multiple systems below it that will take, it takes more effort. It takes more synchronization. And there's a definite supply chain dependency, like for cybercrime too as well. There's a thing called fast flux hosting. So you kind of switch between different systems, and you're dependent on multiple. It could be multiple hosting providers, or a hosting provider has like systems, and it's really hard to trace where your traffic comes from. That's great. So what if I build a system on top of it, and I offer some kind of AI service that I'm even faster, but it depends on the speed, but I'm dependent on the speed of the fast flux hoster. So I can offer something with AI, and I can say like, oh, this is great, but I'm dependent on the speed of my provider. And if he's not innovating, I am just limited by that. And that's what we're seeing right now. What I think could happen is perhaps that, let's say we see those vulnerability scanners, and we see malware coding, and we see fuzzing, and we see all these things. So we're seeing separate point solutions that are now being launched in the underground. They will consolidate to one. And you can see that happening with agentic AI. So we have an agent that does a lot of scanning, and the results go to the different agent that finds the vulnerabilities. Then maybe there's documentation or software available online from that version that's vulnerable. Then we have an agent that goes and then grabs the software and fuzzes the hell out of it, finds mistakes or finds vulnerabilities. Then you have one that grabs all the knowledge from Stack Overflow, because every coder looks at Stack Overflow, right? We don't develop our own code. We just borrow a little bit, tweak a little bit. Oh, it runs. Okay, great. So we use that and we build an exploit. So that chain, I think that was going to be one of the first signs when we can see a complete shift, because then it's more hands-off for the criminal. Make no mistake, they're still human, right? But they don't have to do all these things separate, but they can do them all chained. So if we come to some of the conclusions, cyber criminals are focused with similar challenges as we are. As much as we are in our industry, and you can go to different vendors that say like, oh, you have our AI agents and other things, and I'm curious. I come here like it's my 7th year or something, and last year we had AI. Now we have agentic AI. What are we going to have next year? Agentic XDR? You name it. I don't know. I don't know if there's marketeers here in the room, but I coined it right here. So it's like agents working, and they can actually talk together from different vendors, and we can make things work. That would be great, actually. We talked about it. Going from innovation to transformation takes a lot of time. I really hope, and then we can see it. It's much faster now. It's much faster. I hope not 2 decades, because I'm too old for that stuff then. And make no mistake, we can look at all the best innovations, but trust me, if we can innovate, but if we do not fix our weak passwords, if we do not fix our unpatched systems, if we do not apply multi-factor authentication where we can, criminals don't need to innovate. They just need to get your passwords, and they're already in, and you can have the best next-gen AI, whatever, but if you drop your passwords all over the place, or your supplier does, or whatever, they can still get in. So they still will always prefer a weak victim over somebody that they have to jump through hoops for. And that's the thing, right? It's a cat and mouse. I really, and maybe it's daunting, but I think the opportunity lies with us. We have a data problem, we have a lot of data, and we have a lot of smart people, and everybody's working at it, and you can see that people are consolidating alerts into a whole incident, and we're making that mean time to detect and respond a lot shorter. By that time when we have it, then we'll force criminals to make new innovations. It's very similar to what we see with endpoint versus EDR. Like ransomware criminals at the point it was the first endpoint, that's not a big deal, and they can roam around, and now everybody is buying EDR, deploying EDR, and you can see actual behaviors, you can see when people are moving around your network and escalating privileges and doing all kinds of stuff. And now criminals are like, oh, and we see chats from criminals like, oh, EDR, well, that's the next innovation, that's difficult. We struggle with this, and then you get EDR evasions. I don't know, who's seen the tags here? I thought they were awesome. The EDR evasion is real? No. If you don't, walk around the city or around this area, you can see them spray painted as like guerrilla marketing. But yeah, that's what threat actors now doing. They're trying to evade all those tools. So what can we do about it? How can we apply knowledge? Like I said, stay informed. Stay on top of things. Look at the latest developments on the good side, and then read up on the bad side as well, if you can. Like our threat report, OpenAI is a great source. There's other vendors out there that are looking at the same things, and collect all that stuff. Build up your knowledge. Understand where things are going, and apply countermeasures where you can. Be proactive about things. If you see that there's developments in, let's say, credentials, and they want to filter out the more accurate credentials better than before, like the example we gave you, maybe it's a good time to look at, okay, how is my identity access management arranged? Can I improve things? Are there things that I can do to make life harder for these criminals? And we're all in this together. It's like we have collaborative defense, right? Learn from each other, share knowledge, share things that are happening. If you uncover something new, share it with your coworkers. If you're in a sharing group like an ISAC, or heck, even if you blog it on Medium, we need to get the word out about things. That's why I like the know before example, because that's a new innovation. That's a new thing that we haven't seen before. And it's just, yeah, from a research perspective, it's cool. But don't get me wrong, it's also very concerning. But that's how we share awareness, and everybody here in the room plays a role. And there is a fear for me for, like, we see open source models becoming more available, less powerful, but more readily available, and also less tracking on it from threat actors. And that kind of opens up a threat for a lot of criminals to start developing stuff, and there's no scrutiny. So the major Anthropic, OpenAI, all those companies are doing a lot of checking on, like, is my system being used maliciously, and all these things. Is it against the guidelines? And they do a lot of checking even before the model goes out. So internally, their models are way, way, way further along, but they need to red team it and make it more secure. And with open source models, there's less scrutiny. So we could see that criminals are going to leverage that to their behalf. So that's things that worry me a little bit, but I have positive faith in us all. So with that, I come to the end of my talk, and I think we have some minutes left for questions, if there is any. Otherwise, if there's no questions, I'd like to thank everyone for their attention, and I hope everybody has a great week.